My name is Walter William Toth, and I grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Were you there when the war started?
Yes, I did. I lived
Okay.
there.
How old were you?
17.
How did you decide to go into the service?
Well, first of all, I had to work on my parents since I was only 17 years old and going to be graduating from Allentown High School. I needed the parental approval. I wasn't 18 years old. Of course, I had to work on it for several weeks, and with the story of saying, look, if I don't go where I want to go, I'm going to be drafted and in all probability be in the Army. Not that that would have been distasteful. However, the reason I wanted to join the Marines is the Boxer Rebellion. When I was a kid, they always referred to Marines in China, and I met one that was a China Marine, and they were rather efficient over there. Fortunately, going in July of 1942, which was 7 months after the start of the war, that they had pre-war standards, so that I recognized that the training that I would receive there would be lifelong. And that's one of the reasons why I joined them, knowing full well that the instructions that you would get there and the friendships that you would make probably would be lifelong.
Well, they have that reputation. Did it prove out in your case?
Yes, it did. I think that that service molded my life.
In what ways?
I think perhaps it taught me humility and honesty, fair play, and treating all people with respect. Sorry about that.
And what was your specific role in the Marine Corps? What were you trained to do?
After I went to boot camp, I got the opportunity to go to aviation machinist mate school in Florida. It was a 5-month course, and after I finished that course, I was sent out to El Centro, California. It's a Marine Air Corps station out there, and I worked on F-4Us. An F-4U is a Vought Corsair aircraft. It has a gull wing on it, and the purpose of the gull wing is to accommodate the large propeller that they had on that ship. So after being out there for that period of time, I went overseas, and I was over there overseas for 15 months. I was on 5 ships, and we sailed from Treasure Island in the West Coast to New Hebrides, which in the city of Fadi is where we were. So I was there for a period of about 2 months. Then I was sent north to the island of Emaru. At that time, Emaru was the furthermost, had the furthermost northern troops in the Pacific. And so I was there and working on aircraft. And the purpose of that island was a hopping point for aircraft to take off and go to Rabaul. Rabaul was perhaps about 50 miles away, but it was a Japanese stronghold. And then from Emaru, I went to the Philippines, and I went up there on a Liberty ship. There were only 500 of us aboard. We went into Leyte and to Samar. They're jointly connected there. And so we were there in the harbor for a short period of time. And then we went into the invasion of Mindoro, which is another island. And we were then going to supposedly go to Luzon, which is in the Layene Gulf. And so instead we went down to Mindanao, a city called Zamboanga. Supposedly that's where the monkeys have no tails. The idea of being in these islands, we were close to the front lines, unlike in the backward areas where you might be miles away from the action. So in some of these islands, your work carried very close to the front lines. So I didn't kill anybody, but I did engage, was involved in some combat. We had rifles, and that was our secondary activity. So I was over there for 15 months, and I was aboard 5 ships, so I can honestly say I saw an awful lot of the Pacific Ocean.
You were trying to do repairs on aircraft. Where did you get all of the equipment and supplies to do it? I mean, you're out in the middle of the ocean.
Well, we didn't rip an engine apart. The engine came intact, but there were a lot of preservatives that were on the engines. you had to make all these connections, take it out of the aircraft and put it in there in another aircraft. And so I went to school for 5 months in order to learn all of that. And
did you ever run out of supplies or not have anything available to you to do the work?
These things were readily available.
Okay.
And there was an occasion where one of the Navy boats came in, a twin-engine plane, that we had to change the engines on, and that was really a foreign element. So I made various templates in order to remember where the heck to hook up all the connections. So,
were your repairs all done on board the ships, or did you go on land?
No, it was all on land.
Okay, so they had built some temporary facilities where you could work.
All on land, yeah. And some of the islands, like the Philippines, the planes would take off, and they would, in many cases, drop napalm. Napalm is like a wooden pontoon. When it hits the ground, it explodes and its fire goes all over the place. So they did a lot of that, and you could actually see the planes taking off and going a short distance and unloading those things. So,
did you enjoy the work?
Well, it gave me an opportunity to learn something. I mean, so I went in at age 17. And I got out in October 19th, and I was going to be 21 on November 20th, which is a month later.
So what was the scariest moment that you had?
Well, I'll tell you, I think the scariest moments were sleeping in a tent and in the occupied area. You never knew if somebody was going to come in and cut your throat, you know. So that was the only scary part. I remember I was on a truck. We were unloading a truck, and so I was in the back, and there was a low electrical line there, and I had to get up on this truck and on the hardware that was there, and I thought, well, there's a perfect shot for somebody. So to lift the line up so the truck would go underneath. There were moments where when we left Emaru, we were actually in the Solomon Islands in Tulagi Bay. Now, the Solomon Islands, that war was raging in September of '42, and I was still in boot camp. But anyhow, we stopped there after it was secured, and that's where I found out in the bay there was a ship, the Birmingham, and that's one of the pictures I showed you with that Marine on it. He was a seagoing Marine. And I found out that it was a Birmingham, and this is a big cruiser, and it was all camouflaged, and there were quite a number of Navy warships out in the bay. So I got permission. They took me with a small boat, unannounced to my friend's brother. He was a seagoing Marine, and what their function is to accommodate the captain of the ship, running messages and things of that sort, and then they operate secondary guns. So I went aboard the ship, and they located him, and then had lunch aboard the ship there on the Birmingham, and it was really a very solid feeling. In other words, sitting on this big cruiser, and it was like sitting on a steel platform. But then I went back on shore, and later on, the Birmingham was sunk. I remember him saying that he was so close to water he could touch the ocean. After that, he was assigned to a line company, and I know he's involved in the Battle of Peleliu. And the picture that I have is he and his brother came to my home after a short period of time after I was home, and then we went out to a bar and had a couple of drinks. But Bob Mackus, the sailor, I went to high school with him, and his brother George was just a little younger. And so I knew the family, and they had a couple of siblings, girls, and so we sort of traveled together. In fact, when I was young, I bought bicycle parts and had a bicycle shop, and so I could repair bicycles. And so I decided to build a bicycle, starting from buying rims and spokes and stringing these wheels and having nice chrome fenders, and I sold it to the Marine in a picture for $8.
So you had mechanical skills going back to high school.
Yes, I did. I had a yen to build things with my hands.
Well, sounds like the military took very good advantage of their skills.
I feel that the fact that I went in when I did, they had pre-war standards, and that molded my future in terms of looking at people. And I think one of the most important words in this whole process is attitude.